So you want to level up the exploration and social pillars of your game with some actual game systems that support it? I got you covered. You might have heard of skill challenges, but what are exploration and social skill challenges? This is not your standard get a certain amount of successes before 3 failures type of situation. This is a new rule where everyone gets one check, one chance to make an impact on what's about to happen and see what you can do. So I'm here to deliver you a system for the neglected pillars of the game, social and exploration, to be able to have you deliver cinematic moments for travel, resting, dungeon exploration, social encounters, talking to NPCs, convincing others, debating. There's just so many ways to use these. But in this video, I'm going to talk about overall ways to use them, when you would actually use them, how they work rules-wise, how to run them off, and then some examples. Also, if you're not familiar, you can absolutely use this system in a game like Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder, or really lots of tabletop roleplay games. It is a game system with dice and skill checks, etc. But this is a core system in my new tabletop roleplay game, DC20. And along with a lot of improvements to combat with action economies and systems and character creation and all these other things, yes, that's right, DC20 is massively supporting the exploration and social pillars of the game. DC20 is an alpha right now, so a lot of the rules have been focusing on combat because that is a huge, very important pillar to make sure you nail correctly, and the most difficult pillar to balance and stuff, which is why I released it first. But now this is a little sneak peek into what's to come. And speaking of what's to come is the Kickstarter. Kickstarter launches June 4th, y'all. And if any of this stuff in this video interests you, check out the video in the description for all more videos on DC20. If you can't really wait for the Kickstarter, there is access to the alpha for just $5 at this point now, where you can pick up the alpha for yourself and get a little access to see what's going on. And then the Kickstarter on June 4th. The bigger and better the Kickstarter does, the bigger and better the DC20 and its community and all the content is going to flow out for it. So the link for the Kickstarter and everything else I said is always down in the description. So what are these things? Skill challenges in general, I see as another mode of the game. You have the standard mode where you just kind of make checks and players say they do stuff and they role play and they talk and they say they do things, and you might make checks at certain points where you don't know if they're going to be able to succeed at the thing they said that they did. Cool. And then there's combat, and you're in combat, there's turns, there's a turn order, all that kind of stuff, right? This I see as a third version of the game, a third mode of the game, where there is a moment, there's a challenge in front of you, whether it be social, combat, exploration. There's something in front of you that you want to codify in a gamified mechanic to add some stakes, add some levels of rewards, setbacks, other problems that could arise based on how well those rolls go in this isolated moment. So this is not certain rounds. Every round represents a check. This is not a set amount of time. This is a moment. How big and long this moment is depends on what you want to use it for. It could be something really quick for a short period of time, of meeting an NPC for the first time, trying to make a good impression. Or it could last hours as an entire party delves through a dungeon, trying to find all the nooks and crannies, making skill checks where they creatively try and come up with ways in which they could use their skills to explore this dungeon better. But the big picture is everyone gets one role. They're going to creatively try and think about, look at their character sheet, look at their skills. What are they good at? What would their character do in this situation? Maybe it's more of a role play choice instead of a what's my highest dice roll choice. Either way, players are all going to make one check against a certain DC to try and beat it. And if they beat it, they get success points. And the more they collect, the more success points, the better things go, more rewards you get, the less setbacks you get, all that stuff. So now, when would you use these? I kind of started alluding to it in different ways. If there's a moment that you actually want to set up on a pedestal a little bit and separate it from just the normal run of the mill, I'm making checks, I'm doing things, I'm saying I do stuff, I make checks, cool. A quick little example would be a rickety bridge. Maybe there's a rickety bridge and you want to run that off normal, to where like players describe what they do, and at certain moments you stop and they make a check and see what happens. You could absolutely run it off live, like in live mode, where everybody's kind of live doing whatever they're wanting. Sometimes players make more checks than others, which is another benefit of a skill challenge system where all players make one check instead of one player doing a whole bunch of checks sometimes and other ones just kind of sit back. So for this rickety bridge, you could run it off normal and just have all the checks be made, sure. Or you could turn this rickety bridge traveling across from one point to the other into a skill challenge. An exploration skill challenge where everyone has the problem in front of them. There's a rickety bridge with some ropes frayed over here. There's some wood planks that are about to crack and break. It's really windy and it's starting to rain. What would you do to help this situation? What type of check would you make to be able to help this? Do you have a certain spell? Ooh, make a spell check. Do you have a trade skill in basket weaving and you're really good at tying ropes and knots? Ooh, what a great time. So now you set up this moment of this bridge as this challenge, and players creatively talk back and forth. Oh, if I do this, and oh, if you do that, maybe you could stand on my shoulders and do this, and then I will jump off and do that. And then either way, all the players are going to think about what that one check is they're going to make. But I don't want to get into the rules of all this stuff and how that will work out. I'll come back to that bridge analogy here in a second. But other ways you could use this. For exploration, you could do some traveling through unknown lands if they're going through a desert or traveling through a forest, trying to find something. A great thing if you're trying to find an object. You're exploring through an area. How do I know if we find it or not? Well, you need a certain amount of success points to find it. And maybe if this challenge goes poorly and you don't get enough success points and not enough people roll high enough, maybe you stumble into a combat. Oh no, you found this monster lizard. Or maybe you get there to the site of the thing you were looking for, but it's already taken. Other examples could be resting, where you're setting up camp and you're in a dangerous area, a tundra, a super cold is about to get really cold. How well can you prepare the campsite? Exploration skill challenge. I'm going to try and prepare this, and I want to try and tie this down, and let's try and get some supply, keep us warm. Or one of my more recent favorite examples is exploring through an entire dungeon. We've all had some moments where you want to explore through a dungeon, and then you have to go through the moments where you're like, okay, do you want to go left or right down this hallway? And there's these two nondescript cave hallways, and you're like, I'm going to go left, I guess. You can actually use exploration skill challenges to travel through the entire dungeon. I'll use the example at the end. For social examples, you can see how well an NPC receives the party. How impressed are they by a certain display of skills that they show? They can have to jump through hoops and perform some sort of initiation to be able to get into the group. Just recently, I ran a social skill challenge where my group had to try and get their way into a thieves guild. Didn't go so well. But the scaffolding and game system I set up for them to have the skill challenge really made it clear of how well they were doing. It set some stakes up, gave them a bar to reach, trying to get a certain amount of success points and see if they could roll high enough to get it. And they didn't. But the story keeps moving forward, and we'll talk about that in a second. You could even run entire courtroom scenes or debates with a king, trying to win favor or trying to convince somebody of something. All right, but now how they work. The big picture is every PC is going to make one single check. There's no initiative here, so it doesn't have to be a certain one in the table or certain order. There is a problem you set in front of them, whatever it may be. And they all get to talk and think about what they would do in that situation. Sometimes that certain checks might be made before others, depending on how the sequences of a story are. An example just comes to mind where I ran an exploration social skill challenge, almost all in one, where the party was outside of a town. They had to sneak into the town and rescue a hostage. What do you do? Now, you do have to give more information than just that as a game master, but that comes up in the next step here. But that is the problem. That's the challenge. Now, who's going to make what checks and what's going to happen? Who goes first? It doesn't matter. It depends on when you make your dice roll, depends on where you say you do what in the story. So if you want to say something about, oh, I want to do this thing before we go in. Okay, cool. Then you'll roll your dice right now. Or, oh, let's say once we're inside and see how this goes, I'm going to do this here. Or if this happens, I'm going to do this. You tell this possible outcome of what could happen if everything goes well. But then that's where the fun part comes in when it doesn't. But the big picture is everybody makes that one check, and they're making that check against the skill challenge DC, whatever that number is. And you're trying to meet or beat that DC. If you hit that DC, you get one success point. Awesome. But here's the cool part, and this is a standard protocol in DC 20 across the entire game system. Every by 5, you get another success point. So let's say the DC was 15. All right. And if you got a 15, cool, you get one success point. 16, 17, 18, 19. At 20, whoa, you rolled super high, added all this numbers, and you got a 20 something or what? 21. That's 2 success points because you beat the DC by 5. And it happens every 5. And if you get a natural 20, that adds +1 as a bonus on top of everything. But now for the failures. What happens on a failure? You get a setback. Now this setback is going to be wildly dependent upon what it is you're doing. Are you traveling across a rope bridge? Are you breaking in to try and get a hostage out? Are you traveling through a forest? What are you doing? And that's the great part for game masters, is we can really set the stakes of how dangerous is this? How threatening, how risky is this thing? You can have each and every failure have some negative penalty for each person that fails. So if you fail, this happens. If you fail, this happens. Or it could be applied to the overall group, where each failure makes the NPC more upset with you, or each failure takes you more and more time to try and get to your destination. And then of course there's the overall failures and the overall amount of success points that you get. And that's the big picture here. So let's say there's a party of 4 and you have the DC set at 15, 4 players, DC 15, and they each start making rolls. Somebody fails, they don't get it. Oh no, that's no success points. Somebody succeeds. Awesome. Yes, cool. 1 success point. Somebody rolls out of their mind, super crazy, 20 something. Oh my God, 2 more success points. The group now has 3 with 1 final player ready to roll. They make their check. Let's say they exactly hit it for the sake of simplicity, and they get those 4 success points. They needed 4 success points. They got 4 success points. They succeed. Bing. And if they had gotten 3 success points, they fail. right? That's as simple as you can make it. And if you want to have just one threshold, one bar for them to try and hit of getting this amount of success points, you win, you lose, and have some sort of benefits, some sort of setbacks or whatever happen, cool. Or you can make it as complex as you want and be able to be like, okay, now if you get 3, that's it. But at 2, it's not as bad and they still like you, but they still, and at 1, oh, it's only 1 failure, you're just a little bit behind. And at the same time, which is my favorite part of this, is you can have higher and higher and higher rewards. I've set up skill challenges to where, man, all right, they need 4 skill challenge, they need 4 skill points, but if they get 8, what crazy stuff would happen if they get 8? You know what? If they get 8, I'm going to give them another little companion that's going to help them travel through the forest. They're going to get this little like weird dog beast that helps them guide them through the forest. That'll be fun. And then turns out the skill challenge, they go crazy. Somebody gets a nat 20. Somebody uses inspiration dice because the skill challenge just means so much to them. And they get this wild number and they hit 8. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is what you get. But I'll talk more about rewards and setbacks at the end. So now the biggest picture I can paint for you, and this might be the most important thing I say in this video to get you really to understand this, is you set a problem in front of them. They think about how they can do it. They can talk to each other at the table. They collaborate, be like, I might do this. I'm going to do that. Oh, if you're going to do that, I can do this. Cool. And at the same time, some players might be like, oh, we're going to do this thing. And you might have an idea that's way off this way. Y'all can still do it. Because the beautiful part is you're all just trying to make a roll that's high enough to beat the DC. And then you get to tell the story of what that success looks like. So if you're trying to you're trying to do a breaking and entering, break into somewhere and steal an object, right? And these 3 players have this crazy awesome idea and they work together and they have all these checks to intertwine and work off each other. Cool. And this one player's like, I'm going to try and go around the back. And they just do something completely different. Roll the dice, because this is the potential story. Before any rolls are made, it's just all hypotheticals of what potentially might happen. And then you roll the dice and they get to help tell the story. And then you get to tell the story of what actually happens. Does that person going around the back, do they get caught and they have to run around, the alarm sounds and that's why, everything starts going crazy? Or do they sneak around the back and actually turns out that's actually was the best way, because this way, there's guard dogs, and you can start adding to the story. And you can also collaboratively do this from game master and players coming together to tell the story. You already know what the dice rolls are. You already know how many success points they got, and you can go through that whole process. That's the beautiful part, is as you go through one check at a time and you start to see and build up and set that tension, building up towards how many success points they need, all that kind of stuff. You now see, are we about to succeed? Or are we about to fail? And you can start telling that story. And after you have all the dice and all the numbers, you know what the end result are. But now in the very fun moment, maybe the most fun moment about this whole thing, is you get to tell a story of what that result looks like. What's the actual story that happened? Okay, now, how you actually run these things, some little tips for running them off, and examples at the end. Also, sorry, this video might be a little bit longer than usual, but I'm trying to be as useful and helpful as possible. So if you do like this video, like it, comment below, all that kind of stuff. It really does help the video, especially these DC20 videos, help spread them out there, get them to more people. And while you're at it, let them know about that Kickstarter coming up. Okay, tips on running skill challenges. This is for also combat skill challenges along with exploration and social. You have to set the stage. You have to give them things to interact with. You can't just say, all right, you want to break in and get the gem from the safe. All right, what do y'all do? Wait, what? You need to give them things to interact with. Give them pieces to give them things to let them start chewing on. How can I interact with this challenge in front of me? Going across that rickety bridge, give them pieces about the rope on the far left is untied. The entire section in the middle on the left is loose and hanging off to the side. Even simple things like it's raining, add some elements to where maybe the druid wants to try and cast some sort of situation to lighten the rain. Oh, great. That would help the situation and also be cinematic and cool for a thing that they do to help the team. Maybe there's certain tall trees they could try and think about falling, or vines, or give them stuff to interact with. I recently had an exploration across a desert sort of environment where they're traveling across the desert. You can't just say that. You got to give them some stuff. So I describe at some point along this travel, there's these massive sand scorpions that come out of the ground. They start snipping and snapping at you guys. Like, again, that's, oh, is this combat? Are we rolling combat against these scorpions? No, I am providing things and different flavor bits and moments for them to get across. So I described in this journey across this desert, there are going to be certain types of hurdles or challenges to be able to interact with if you want to. Give them choices. Let this story breathe. So there's a sand wall. There's this sand tornadoes that kind of swirl around through this one section. You go to another section. There's sand scorpions that jump out of the sand. You see way off in the distance, there's an oasis. Is it an oasis or is it a mirage? You don't know. And then finally, there's one big massive massive hill, but you know on the other side of it is the sanctuary of the city. Damn, look at that. That's a whole bunch of stuff that 4 players or however many players you have could interact with. Maybe the barbarian really wants to go mess up them scorpions. Maybe the ranger wants to help travel up those sand dunes and MacGyver some sort of way to kind of put on people's feet to be able to help them walk through the sand better. Maybe the spellcaster wants to help do some sort of wind spell to push back the sand tornadoes to break them up to get them be able to pass through. And what about the mirage? What about that oasis over there? These are all things to interact with and let's see what players do. I'd be shocked. Maybe all of them interact with the oasis and that's entirely what they do. And then they make all their checks towards that thing and we'll see what happens. And then you tell that story and you can kind of hand wave the parts of the windstorms. It's sandy and you just kind of blaze through those sections because they're adventurers. They're fine. They would be able to fight off the scorpions. You don't have to run that off as a combat. You could just say you trudge your way through the sandstorm as it stands, beating your face, getting in your eyes. You fight off all the scorpions, but you see that oasis. And then you start telling the story of what they wanted to interact with. And a lot of times, usually players tend to try to spread themselves out. Like, okay, I want to mess with this and you'll mess with that. I'll mess with that. And then cool, you tell that story and you make the checks one at a time. And that's another thing for a tip here is when you ask each player to make the check, in general, how I run this is I get everyone to say what they're going to do. No dice have been rolled yet. Everyone's just going to say what the potential plan is, right? Of what they're going to do. And then they have them lock in their number. Okay, you're going to make this check. Okay, cool. Let's lock that in. What are you thinking? Okay, cool. You're going to make this kind of check. Lock that in. All right. All right, everybody good? Okay. Let's see what happens. And then I usually have them roll that out in what makes sense in order of time, like sequential timeline type things. But then sometimes if there's one player that does something crazy and we want to see what that is to the end, I might let them save that to the end. And I've also tried doing it where everyone just makes their checks at the same time and they all have their numbers. And then now everybody's sitting on their number, knowing if they did high or low or not. And everybody can kind of chit chat and, oh man, I botched this one, or, oh yes, I got it. Yeah. And they don't know what this DC is, because that's another tip here is I don't always tell them what that DC is. Let's say, for example, it was 14. If they get a 13, I'm like, you just missed. And it starts to be a description we're familiar with from Dungeons and Dragons, where if a creature's armor class is a certain number, you start to describe, and once they hit it, players start to get a feel for like what that number is, which also is kind of a way that I run off these skill challenge DCs. But at the same time, I've also just said it at the very beginning, this is a DC 14 skill challenge, baby. Here we go. And that might be a tactic I use if I want to set that bar of tension of like, oh, wow, we've never done a DC 14 before. Wow. And at the same time, we also have how many success points you need. How many success points do you need to be a success? And the players also don't know what's those levels of success. Maybe 3 is a success. Maybe 2 is a success. But what could we get at 4 or 6, 7? Ooh. So once you start using these systems, you'll start to get familiar as a game master, and your players will start to get familiar as well with what the stakes are. How many success? You could have a low DC and a high number of success points needed, or vice versa. Or keep it really simple or make it really hard. But the default formulas that I have as my starting baseline, which I recommend for you to start off with your starting baseline of what would be a medium challenge, is the following formula for the DC. It's 8 plus the player's prime modifier, which at level 1 is just 3, and plus your combat mastery. Combat mastery in DC 20 equals half your level, so it's just 1. So a super simple out the gate level 1 skill challenge for DC 20 would be a DC 12. 8 plus 3 plus 1, 12. So that's a nice DC. Okay, cool. Medium DC 12, gotcha. And then the number of success points needed would be the number of players at the table. Very simple number. How many player characters? You got 4 player characters, that's 4. You got 5, it's 5. And now it sets the standard of if everyone rolls super average, like a 50-50 shot, like down the middle, if everyone rolls normal, everyone needs 1 success point. That's their normal baseline. And a final tip for game masters before getting into examples is you can give advantage out to these rolls. Also, these rolls, these aren't like class features where I'm going to rage, or I'm going to use my arcane sigils and all these other types of features. This is a skill challenge. This is not a combat. We are not using certain features and spending mana. You are describing whatever it is you want. If you want to describe, another thing I should also be clear on here is if you want to use magic and describe magic, you don't spend mana points. If you want to use these cool whatever features, you don't spend charges. That this is all cinematic and this is not meant to do any of that. Now, if you want to have this wear down resources, a lot of times I do that in combat skill challenges where it costs a mana or it costs health whenever you're certain, if you fail and stuff like that. I get into that in the other one as well. And you can choose for this to wear down resources as well. That is another benefit, another use of skill challenges. Now, anyway, as game masters, you can give out advantage for creative uses and ideas of like, oh, that is so cool. Wow. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And that's a really creative use of a class feature or a situational thing, or you're using something I said from another session that you knew about this NPC and you're saying it here. Wow. All right. Advantage on that check. I even had this happen very recently in my last session where I ran off an exploration skill challenge. There was a creature, this crazy, weird beast that was attacking a farmland and taking some cattle. And they ran an exploration skill challenge to try and set up, to try and find the creature, hunt him down. Another use of exploration skill challenges. And we're getting down to the wire. We're having each person make a check, and they were making checks across different things in different locations. One was looking for the den of the creature. The other ones were kind of setting up some stuff at the actual farm site. And then at one player, there's only 4 players in the group. We've already made 2 checks, and we're getting down to the final descriptions. And this player right here, making their 3rd check, they described something that was so cool, so outside the box. I was like, what if the thing they're doing, what if I have this player who has this item that they picked up from this cave that would be useful here? What if they use that item and they pour it over this, cow that is the bait that we're using? And I was like, wow, that is so cool. How do you reward that? I didn't think it was good enough to just say, like, oh, okay, you can make your check at advantage, which also in some ways wouldn't make sense because they were making some check and they came up with this cool idea for this other player who'd already made their check to do something cool. I was like, you know what? This is my best on the fly game master solution for this. And I would recommend this for y'all as well. If players come up with some outside, like, oh my gosh, wow, I gave them another check. I gave them a bonus entire check, right? Now, they could succeed or fail on the check, which, could be a wash, but they could get 1 success point. They could roll really high and get another one. So I actually had that player that already rolled. I brought them back into the mix. I had them make another check thanks to this other player's creative idea. They made another check. They got 1 success point. Ah, cool. Yeah. All right, now let's keep going. So these can be as fluid and flexible and locked in, as open as creative, and as high stakes and as low stakes fun as you want it to be. And again, I gotta stop and talk about this. This is the entire vibe, goal, and direction and focus of DC20, is to provide you guys cool cinematic moments, game systems, dice mechanics, to be able to set up your game and put it up on this pedestal to create these moments and these scenes that you can impact your players with, setting the bar high, making them go for it, making them think creatively, making them think together. And that is the spirit of DC20 and all of its game systems. So if this one thing interests you, there is so much more about DC20. We're much less character creation and combat and all these other types of systems. So really check it out, talk with your friends, share about it, because it's about to get big. All right, now examples. I really feel like examples help really solidify and clear up how these can actually be used and how you can start to think about using them in your games literally next session. So my smallest example that I love doing in one shots at the very beginning of one shots, I notoriously love writing this in there, is the party's together. Here we go. And we are at the place that we just got our quest from. And the quest giver sends us to the equipment shopkeeper that's going to get us all loaded up with healing potions or gear and equipment and the map to go to our destination for this one shot, this quest that we're doing, right? So I send them over to the NPC and then I say, we're going to start a social skill challenge. We are going to try and see how good of an impression you leave on this person. This person is designed to kind of evaluate you and kind of see what you're needing and what you're missing. And if they're not impressed, they're going to just be like, get out of here. And here's the map, go. But if you can impress them, win them over, win some favor, make them like you, speak their language and make them impressed or something, maybe they give you a little bit more. So now the type of NPC that you put in front of these players, and maybe some of the backstory nuggets about information about what this NPC's core motivations or goals are, as far as if they like nice people or if they want to see you be tough, really changes the skill challenge of where this could go. Because I've had a rough and tough, show me how strong you are. Can you break that thing over there? Let's go.
I've also had a sweet little old woman that was, oh, darling, come. What do you need, dearie?
So now the PCs get to think about how they want to engage with this NPC. Do they want to showcase their powers in some way? Do they want to creatively try and get them a gift of some way? One time I mentioned that the NPC was like lonely or something. So the druid went outside, tried to find an animal, and that's what their check was. An animal check to go try and find some little forest creature to bring back and give to them. Now, funny story, they ended up failing that check, but we told the story, and how we all decided collectively to tell that failure was they found a little squirrel and they brought the little squirrel over, handed it to the old woman, and it jumped on her face and started biting her. There's your failure. And also a flashback I just had to this at Gen Con was a group of like 6 players were all starting to describe what they were doing, and they were trying to impress this person. And in this case, they were trying to earn the contract in the first place, which is is another important moment. The skill challenge, the social skill challenge, was they had to earn the contract. Full disclaimer, at the end, regardless of how many failures and how many success points they had, they were going to get the contract. That's also part of this failing forward situation. So the skill challenge set up to try and impress the person to earn this contract to go on this quest. That wasn't the, if they don't get the success, if they don't meet the threshold, now they can't go on the quest. No, that's not it. But we'll get into the rewards of that example here in a second. So all these players are trying to impress this person. I think how it went was there were 6 players. So the first person succeeded, and then we had a failure and a failure and a failure, and it was looking pretty bad. And then we had the last person succeed, and then we're like, wow, okay, y'all have 2 success points. And you need 6. And I, at that point, fully pulled back the curtain. I was like, y'all need 6 success points. So good luck, last person. So the last person goes, they were a barbarian and they wanted to smash a pillar, and they wanted to just go to this pillar and just absolutely mess it up. So in the middle of everybody saying all this stuff, he just smashed the pillar. He gets a natural 20 plus 5 from his athletics, gets it to a 25. He beat the DC twice over, beat it by 10, which means you get 1 success point. He beat it by 10, which beat it by 5, beat it by 10, and he critically hit, giving him 1 player got 4 success points, bringing that total to the 6 they needed, and they succeeded. Huge moment. We then got to revel. I just got chills reliving that moment. We had to revel in that moment, and that barbarian smashed the pillar. The whole freaking things collapsed. Everyone's blown away. Wow! Take the contract before you break something else. Yeah, just take the map and get out of here. Here, take these potions. Take this one too. Just go. So their success in that moment gave them another baseline of what the standard of success was, of an amount of healing potions equal to the number of group members you have, right? And so every success below that is -1 healing potion. Every success above that, they could unlock a limited potion of invisibility, extra rewards. For another example, in a bigger picture, and I literally mean bigger picture, I ran this in my campaign I'm running, is they wanted to do a dungeon exploration. They went down into this cave, and this cave was filled with these like gloom wasps, this massive monstrous wasps with this gloom honey and this sap and sticky things all over the cave, different places in the cave that are described as large gaps that would be very difficult to jump across. Keep that in mind for a second. Huge walls lined with honey that'd be difficult to climb, sections of the cave that I started to describe, and see where these players would interact with. Again, I set the stage of what types of things they could interact with. Different bugs and wasps all over the place, walls, jumps, gaps, sections of little pockets to be able to try and look and explore. Maybe they want to do investigation checks to kind of look and explore through some of these little empty pockets and nests. So I set the stage to explore this dungeon with an exploration skill challenge. I described the entire kind of layout of the dungeon, just the theater of the mind wise, and then they all started to describe what they wanted to interact with. Now, the setting was there was an encounter that they were going to come across. There was a group of NPC squatters that were already in this cave, but how many success points they got determined how I described they found these people. So if they succeeded, and they absolutely regular succeeded, they would be able to explore all the things you explore here. I would describe whatever they interacted with, of course. And then you stumble across, you hear these NPCs, you hear some people in the other room, and they would now have the jump on these people. They'd hear, they know this is going on. And I would be able to also, as a game master, plop them exactly where I wanted to in the story beat of where this cave is. And you describe all this stuff. You guys, we also described the party splitting apart. One went this way, some went that way, which in general, if you ran off the game normally, you wouldn't be able to have those type of cinematic moments. So if they got the exact amount of success points, you hear the NPCs around the corner. But if they got very, very high, which they did, and they actually got 7 success points, oh my gosh, I had 7 successes as you find a magic item through the exploration of this cave. And the person that did it was a monk character who wanted to jump across this gap. You jump across the gap and you land, and you find some skeletons, some bones, and you find a necklace around one of the skeletons, and you can pull it off. It's sticky with honey all over it. You pull it off. This is a magic necklace. So they actually got a magic item from an exploration skill challenge because they did so well. So another tip there for those dungeon masters is, yes, you should have setbacks, and it should matter for the, they don't want to fail type situation. Good story moments, keep the plot progressing, etc. But you can also manage those failures to the point where it can be as punishing as you want it to be to keep the story moving. But then also really get some of those rewards in there sometimes. Let them go crazy. They found they lost their minds when they found a magic item. Wait, what? But now for this same cave dungeon exploration, if they failed the skill challenge, they would have triggered a trap. They would have triggered the trap that this NPC group of squatters is set for them. So they're exploring. I would have described, you go off this way, you go off that way, and then you all kind of converge back together, and you're going through this doorway, and And then I could run off a trap scene. I could plop them. Boop, I could, as a game master, and it's a huge boon to game masters, I can plop them down right where I need them to be for the sake of the story of whatever happens, right? And it's based on the checks and the dice that happened before, and they failed the skill challenge. So they are putting them down right in front of the trap. And then now they still have a chance to interact with the trap, see what's going on and all this stuff. And if they fail, if they had 0 or like 1 success and absolutely botched it, the trap would trigger on them and something would happen and they have to go in there scrambling around there. The trap triggers on, the honey's all over them. Bees start swarming in. The NPC group attacks them. Let's get in combat. Another example I want to give, because we talked about travel, like traveling across bridges or traveling across entire deserts or whatever. You can also have some of the setbacks be losing rest points. In D&D, this is hit dice that you can make people lose. Rest points are the DC 20 equivalent. And if you fail, -1 rest point. You are just really struggling to trudge through this desert. You're getting exhausted. You could give them a level of exhaustion as well. You can apply that exhausted condition on them. That would, ouch. Also in DC 20, exhausting is not as wildly punishing in comparison. So exhaustion or -1 rest point is a nice little notch, a little setback to that individual player struggling in that moment. So sometimes I have individual failures be individual, setbacks for that player, or sometimes they impact the entire group to where you're trying to get to this certain spot, to get this certain item before this opposing group gets to it. Every failure is -30 minutes. Oh no, we got to get there. We got to go. Now you've taken travel across distances and turned it into something that has stakes, feels exciting, all that stuff. So there's the individual failures you got to think about as far as what happens on when one player character fails. Also keep in mind there's a by 5s to failures too. You could add if you wanted to. You don't have to. You can make failures as punishing or not as you want, but failure could be one thing. You lose 1 rest point, but every 5 you lose another rest point. If you get a natural 1, you lose another one. Or you could run a stealth mission to where y'all are trying to sneak into a place and you have the guards are looking around. It's like a stealth mission. Instead of a make a group stealth check and everybody just makes a generic group stealth check and that's it. You could run a secret stealth mission and everyone has an exploration skill challenge to try and get into this spot. Are you detected? Does anybody see you? All that stuff. And you could just simply say, and this would set a huge amount of tension, anyone gets a natural 1, immediately alerted. Ooh, baby. Okay, let's go. Also, as a side note, something I am play testing right now is that on a natural 1, you actually take away a success point from the overall total. Because hey, natural 20s add 1, absolutely. So natural 1, balance. So that's for the individual failures of if you fail. And on the successes, if you succeed, you get success points. And that's already going to be inherently good for depending on what the overall outcome of how many success points you get for whatever. But you also could give individual rewards out to that person. In the skill challenge I just ran for my group about there was that beast that was hunting down the cattle on the farm. Every success point they got, they could apply towards the thing they did. So if they did, one of the players was hunting the beast at the spot and they set a trap for the beast. So they succeeded and their 1 success point dealt damage to that creature earlier on. So now the creature is wounded as it runs away to its lair. And now when they actually engaged it in combat, it was a little bit wounded and they actually dealt damage to it before the combat started. Cool use of a success point towards what they said they did. Another player in the before that check happened, maybe I should have said this once first, is they wanted to walk around the town and ask about this creature. What do they know about this creature? This creature that's attacking, it looks like this. What can I know about it? So they got a success point and I actually told them, yes, they got a success point towards the overall success of things, but their success point also gave them information about this creature. It runs really fast. It's resistant to acid damage. It has a caustic spit in its mouth. It can spray it out at people. So now they have some information before they go into this combat. So successes and failures can give individual rewards or penalties to the players that make them. And then there's the overall big picture of how many success points does the group need? What happens if they hit that? What happens if it's above? What happens if it's below? So then there's the overall thing, which you can make it as simple as setting that 1 bar. How many success points do they need? The number of player characters I have. Cool. Maybe you want to add +1 as like a general rule as well to have it just be a little bit harder than usual. Whatever that bar is, you just have to figure out what happens if they succeed, what happens if they fail, done. If you want to add extra layers of like, if they really fail, or if they really succeed, of course you can. So I genuinely hope that this game system from DC 20 can either be used and play in DC 20, or you can use the inspiration of it for any tabletop roleplay game you're making, or a game that you're making yourself at home and you're making your own rules up for. Speaks to me, love it. And if you like this, you want more, you know where to find all the stuff. You know the Kickstarter's coming. Support for the Kickstarter would mean a ton to me and this community. There's a ton of people that are getting behind DC 20 and I am been blown away by it. So honestly, thank you all. And as always, stay creative, think outside the box. Peace.